Hello, this is Matt Sullivan, and you're here for the Light in the Attic podcast, the latest episode. For this episode, we have a special guest here for the introduction of the episode. I'm with Mark Frosty McNeill of an amazing web radio station and many other things they do here in Los Angeles called Dublab. Dublab's been around for nearly 20 years, and I've known Mark for those 20 years, and they do great work. Coincidentally, their office is right down the street from the Light in the Attic office here in Los Feliz, in the Los Angeles area of Los Feliz, if that made sense. But a pleasure to have you here.
Happy to be here. Yeah, long-time fan, not first-time caller, but happy to chime in again.
Well said. So maybe we'll start this one off. A few weeks ago, at a great local new bar, listening spot, restaurant called In Sheep's Clothing in Los Angeles, run by a great guy named Zach Cowie. We did an event there that Frosty hosted with the guest of Kuni Murai and Daisuke from the band Interior. And it was about Hosono, Haruomi Hosono, whose music we've been reissuing over the last year or so. And we thought we might give a little intro before we kind of go into the talk, which we recorded, or Frosty recorded, is going to let us include today as part of the podcast.
Yeah, what an incredible experience, and to hear this music on the In Sheep's Clothing, a hi-fi system, it was very special. But this was a conversation about Hosono, but with a longtime friend of his, collaborator named Kuni Murai. And Kuni Murai was the founder of Alfa Records that released Yellow Magic Orchestra, some of Hosono's solo material, and also co-founder of Yin Records along with Hosono. And I think the important thing is that Kuni was really a person who intentionally opened a channel of creative expression and gave space for Hosono to do his thing. He gave him the space, he backed off and let the art unfold. And I think that's why it was so impactful now, even decades later, why we're so enthralled by this music. And that's a kind of a rarity, unfortunately, but it's also this kind of guiding light to know that somebody, on the label end and the production end can create a space for just pure, fearless expression. And so we thank Kuni for that. And I think that now, decades later, this Japan series coming out through Light in the Attic, the time is right for it, but a lot of it can, be traced back to Kuni Murai, kind of this godfather of this sort of expression from Japan.
It's kind of nuts that how we were talking earlier about how much he was ahead of his time. He set up a office in Los Angeles, I think at Fairfax and Melrose or somewhere in there in 1980 or so.
Long time back.
Yeah, for 3 years. I think he told us at one point they were spending $10 to $20 million a year. He believed so much in trying to break Japanese music in America, and it primarily didn't quite go financially as he had hoped, and many others in Japan. And America kind of said, sorry, we're not interested. And it took many of us a long time, thanks to YouTube and other things, and Spencer Duran and Yosuke here at Light in the Attic and other people out there to kind of open the door for us and discover this music. But obviously Kuni was the guiding light. And I mean, it is amazing what you said of him opening the door for Hosono and just giving him that much freedom, which I really liked during the interview, which you all are about to hear. Of Kuni almost not even remembering parts of it. It was just I gave him the keys. I said, do whatever the hell you want. I just believed in you.
Yeah.
It's just, it's too bad those things don't exist more often. But he really, he really had so much faith in Hosono, and Hosono is such a incredible musician. It just, shines through.
There's a lineage of creative musicians in the world, but also the labels that are creating the platforms for those musicians. In the interview, you're going to hear him give nods to Ahmet Ertegun of Atlantic, Eddie Barclay of Barclay. And I think that for you, Light in the Attic, you're following in the footsteps of the labels that have come before. I can imagine you're as much a fan of these incredible labels from the past as records that were released. So it's nice to have this as part of the continuum. We're kind of closing the circle, and hopefully people out there can be inspired as musicians or as producers, or if you're running a label, to kind of to let the art take its course and unfold. And we're lucky to have Kuni in this world, and we're lucky to have Hosono in the world. We're lucky to have you, the lovely listener, in the world too.
That is true. Yeah, I feel Kuni is incredibly inspiring. Such a humble, just sweet guy, and he's helped us out with this series all along the last couple of years. But his story is phenomenal, and we touch on you touch on it a bit today. But I think he has a book coming out, I believe, in Japanese, which might be translated in English here in 2019. So he probably has. I know he has a lot more stories to be shared with the world. Yeah.
What you can't hear on the podcast is what a snappy dresser he was. He was looking very good. And so
always looks good.
Revisionist history. By the way, I was wearing a tuxedo.
I forgot that part. Wow. Beautiful tux. White tux.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Frosty, for doing this. And huge thanks to Dublab. You all should check out Dublab. They're online at dublab.com. It's a nonprofit.
Yes.
They could use support. And 19 years is a long time for anything on the web, but especially internet radio stations.
But fueled by great music, Light in the Attic, and fueled by, again, this kind of continuum of creative music. So we're thankful for the people who put in the hard work to make the music available, and we're just a conduit to share it. So happy to do that.
Well, thank you. And thanks again to Yosuke, Kuni, and Zach at Sheep's Clothing for making this all happen.
Yeah.
All right. Here is the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Enjoy.
I wish I had brought him an award or something. He deserves an award, but the award will be all of your attention. I think we can get comfortable and say, yeah, I think so. We'll be casual.
Can you see me?
But thank you. We're gonna get casual and enjoy ourselves. So we've been listening to some Hosono already. You started off with that Hosono House 1973 album. 73. And so 73, how many years? I'm not good at math. 45 years ago?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
Can I speak?
I would love nothing
right.
more than for you to speak for us.
My name is Kuni Murai. I'm a songwriter and a music publisher and the owner of a record company called Alfa Records. And then I ran a music publishing company in Los Angeles from 1980s to year 2000. And I'm known as a composer, but at the same time, I produced many records. And then most of the records with Haruomi Hosono, because I loved his music.
Well, we love his music too. I'd love to actually kind of feel out how many of you are pretty deep Hosono fans and how many of you are new to him, because now we have this new opportunity. Light in the Attic is kind of putting out, for the first time ever, here in the United States, a lot of Hosono material. How many super deep Hosono fans are here?
Oh, many.
Sprinkling. I would say that I'm getting there, but it's a deep world. Mm. He's somebody who is so prolific that to be a deep Hosono head takes time. But I think now we're in this wonderful opportunity to be able to, for the first time, really have access to this music and access to the music in a really beautiful way. I'd love to actually kind of reel it back a little bit. You did a nice introduction, Kuni, but can you tell people a little more about your background, where you're coming from? You're a musician, you're a songwriter, and by the time you met Hosono, you were already doing your thing.
Yeah, I met Hosono in 1970. By the time I was quite established hit song writer. Maybe I wrote 10 or 11 number one hit songs in Japan. And then I went to Paris in 1969, and I started a music publishing company. And the first song I published is the song called My Way. Written, the English lyrics was written by Paul Anka. Those days, in 1970s, Carole King was my writer. You know, I represented her songs in Japan. So I traveled to Paris, London, New York, Los Angeles, and Tokyo all the time since 1970 to up until now.
Let's talk about your songs, because you mentioned some of these international artists, which is very important, and I think that publishing is a powerful thing. But you're an artist, and let's talk about the world you were in, and you started to intersect. You were doing some work that then intersected with Hosono's world. Where were you coming from as an artist?
When I was a high school student, I was playing in the jazz band. Actually, my friend Miao is there, and please stand up. Stand up. That's
perfect.
Miao is the professor at USC. He teaches economics. We used to play in the high school jazz band, and he played tenor saxophone. I played alto saxophone.
So maybe you guys could jam afterwards. You bring your horns.
So that's how I met American music. Well, long before, my father, who was a Navy engineer, he designed aircraft, kind of thing. So he was a big fan of American music from 1920s and 30s. So I used to listen to all those songs. Then, when I was a college student, I wrote a song which became a hit. So,
what style was that?
It's a combination of Japanese melody and Western harmonies. Yeah.
So this was pre-group sounds kind of hitting, or was it around the same time?
Right at the group sounds era.
So group sounds is the kind of guitar-driven, almost like a copy of the Ventures, but inspired by the Ventures and these bands, these guitar bands.
You know old stories.
You're going to give us more stories.
Do you know Ventures? It's a huge band in Japan. It's an electric guitar band, and their melody fitted to Japanese people, and they became a big band.
Hugely popular, so much so that there were these kind of copycat bands all over who would get the same type of guitars the Ventures had, and Japanese companies would start making models that mimic this. It was this eleki sound and group sounds. So this was this phase. I kind of feel like in modern Japanese music, I kind of feel like it was like being in junior high school, where you're like, I'm starting to figure out what's cool, but I'm not being fully myself. I know this is cool, so let's group together with people and let's dress similar, and let's do a sound. But it was hugely popular, and it was one of these first things to kind of start to blast off. And you wrote some group sounds tunes.
Yes. I wrote a song for one of the group sounds band called Tempters. The same name exists in the States, but Japanese Tempters. And then I wrote the song based upon the Gabriel Fauré's Pavan, the classical music, and I made it into kind of rock version of the Fauré, and which became number one. And after that was 1968. Wow, long time ago.
Get your calculators out, your calendars out. Tell us about a group called the Floral.
Floral, I think they are the beginning of Japanese rock music. And in the group, I remember Chu Kosaka, the dearest friend of Haruomi Hosono, was in the band. why you know floral? It's amazing.
That's actually all I know. This is over, folks. This is the end. So, but that then morphed into a band called April Fool, and that was
That's right.
Hosono's, one of his first. And the sounds were changing, so I kind of feel like we're moving from junior high school and kind of getting into high school, where you're like, all right, I've got this jacket, and it looks like everyone else. I'm gonna like rip the sleeve. You know, it's gonna be a little different. And so this kind of new rock sound was coming up in Japan.
Yeah.
And people's hair, of course. So this is all over the world. But,
Yeah.
you know, time's going on.
That's right.
Hair's getting longer. People are getting more political. People are finding their voices
Yeah.
and, you know, becoming a little more active. So this band, April Fool,
Yeah.
kicks off, and Hosono is part of this band. Did you guys know each other at that point well?
Yes. I met Hosono for the first time in 1970. That was the time of war in Vietnam. And then there was the famous musical called Hair, Hair, Hair.
Which everyone, you guys know Hair, but this in Japan was the Japanese production of Hair was a hub. You know, it was a hub
Yeah.
for the underground. It was a hub for you know, actors and musicians and artists. Tell us why this was such a phenomenon. Why did this pick
Well,
up steam?
it happened all over the world.
Yeah.
You know, it happened in New York City. It happened in Paris, the famous one in 1968. I don't know how to say it in English, but it's the kind of revolution in May, May Revolution in Paris. And students stood up and threw the stones to the policemen. And then in New York City, Columbia University had a big, you know, how do you say, you know?
I mean, there's a huge protest movement, huge underground kind of movement. I mean, people were...
Anti-Vietnam War
Yeah.
was a big movement. At the same time, younger people shared the feeling together. So it didn't happen only in the States. It happened in France. It happened in Japan. It happened all over the world. So I think those days, younger generation connected throughout the world. So they share the same feeling. And some of them dreamed revolution happens in the world. I didn't believe it, you know. The revolution means, you know, communist revolution. And at the time, Soviet Union spent a lot of money for the PR. So they gave a lot of money to young people.
That's strange. I've heard this term, history repeats itself. I wonder.
Oh, yeah. So in any case, the hair was the sign of the age. And then my friend produced Hair in Japan. And then Hosono's best friend, Chu Kosaka, was the star in the Hair. And Chu Kosaka and Hosono came to my friend's house. And Hosono was playing guitar in the kitchen. And that's the first time I met him. But I instantly after he played guitar, I found, wow, he's a great musician. Sounds totally different from other musicians.
Do you remember what he was playing?
He was playing, I think, French song.
Okay.
Yeah, but the chord work, I don't know how to express, you know, but talking about the good musician, it's almost undescribable, almost hard to tell how he is good, but you can feel it with your heart. And then he hits my heart instantly like this. And then since then, I started using him as a studio musician.
playing bass.
Playing bass.
Primarily?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So he was playing guitar in this house, but he was in a lot of.
That's right.
So you were employing him. I'm sure he was happy.
Yeah.
Getting him involved in studio sessions.
That's right.
And that
That's
was
right.
his kind of first active gig. Like, I mean,
That's
not the
right.
first one, but really he started.
That's right.
Grinding.
That's right.
Tell us about his personality, though. So you were impressed by his music, but I've never met Hosono. Tell us what you thought of him.
I don't know now, but those days, the 1970s, so I make an appointment with him. You come to my house to discuss about this. Come at 9 o'clock, and he showed up midnight.
Jazz hours. So he was on a different speed, you know. But I think that also this was a time that people, young people too, musicians, are also breaking out of the mold of this is what you were supposed to do. This is what my parents did, and they were finding themselves, you know, and doing their own thing. So he's a talented musician who breaks through straight to your soul, but also from the outside, from the number of credits I've seen on records, he's also has an incredible work ethic, and he's dedicated to.
Oh
music.
yes, oh yeah. His passion is in music, so he sometimes, you know, be late, you know.
Is late because he's lost in sound and focused on that, you think?
Yeah, and then I think it's the nature of him. Actually, I called him before this tonight, 2 days ago, but unfortunately I couldn't go through because his cell phone is protected by the telephone company. I have to put some kind of cord to call him. But from United States, it didn't work. So I sent the email to him, and he doesn't respond to email very often, but he responded. He said, sorry. That's all.
Maybe you could like think of the code breaker. Maybe it's like Tropical Dandy or something like that.
Yeah.
So April Fool's his band he's in, and then it kind of splinters, and he starts his band called Happy End with some other heavyweight musicians.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that? And then we should hear a Happy End tune. DJ Zach is over there. He's going to do it for us. But Happy End, what was happening around that time, and what was your kind of connection to him? Were you still employing him for sessions, or was he then focusing more on this band?
You know, rock and roll is American music. Now it's the world music, but the 1970s, rock and roll is from America. Like jazz came from America, blues came up from America. So many people copied rock and roll. You know, in France, Johnny Hallyday copied, you know, Elvis Presley. Many people copied American music.
Yeah.
But in France, in Japan, the people who copied American music didn't sound great, but Happy End sound great.
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
Why did the other stuff not sound great to you?
I don't know the reason. Only very few talented people can translate the feeling of American music, rock music, to other people. Sorry, I cannot tell the reason why.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But you, as a producer, or songwriter, I mean, you have the ear. You had the ear to know that Hosono was heavyweight. He had soul in him as a musician.
Right. That's right.
But also, you can tell when something's not right. And I'm sure that was the reaction if you're hearing things. So a lot of the earlier sound, you know, this was happening. It was English lyrics and doing rock songs or instrumental. But Happy End also seemed to be breaking the mold because they were jumping into this is our music too. Let's make our music. Let's make truly Japanese rock music.
Yeah.
So even the words, and some of the words were also playing with language in such a way that it was unique to its own form, whether it was even a joke within it or wordplay, but stretching sounds. And they were the first Japanese rock band, to really kind of elastically fit Japanese lyrics seamlessly into their sound.
Yeah.
Should we hear a tune now? I think we've got from the second Happy End album, Kazamachi Roman. This is 1971 on Bellwood, and it's going to be Dealer's Choice back there with Zach picking a tune. But let's hear a bit of music to kind of get everybody's ears attuned. We'll talk a bit more about Happy End, and we'll continue our journey in Hosono with Kuni Murai. Whew. And let's give it up for In Sheep's Clothing sound system. So how was that received in Japan?
Only a few people could recognize the band, but everything happens from few people.
Yeah, the right people.
Right people. So I believe in the theory that everything starts from the avant-garde. If it's for everybody, that's for nobody. But if it's for you, it's real thing.
I need to get a license plate holder that says. So this was filtering through the right people, but they were obviously attuned to the sounds especially coming from the West Coast of the United States.
Yeah.
So they were doing something that was in a way wholly Japanese, and it was very much from them.
That's right.
Lyrically.
Yeah.
But they were also looking out to the West Coast.
Yeah.
So much so that they famously took a trip to the West Coast and met Van Dyke Parks with a suitcase full of money. Did you hear about this story when they came back? Were you
hearing? I remember just a little bit about the story. When did it happen?
So this was for their third album, which I think they were also, like any creative people who are kind of exploding with ideas are ready for the next idea. But I think for them, they were probably trying to get to that soul, or as they called it, the Burbank sound, which Burbank sound.
Yeah.
IKEA, there's a big IKEA there. But I mean, they were seeking a sound, and they knew that Lowell George and all these musicians, I mean, this is Topanga, Laurel Canyon, and all these folks had that sound, the sonic nature they were seeking, but they still wanted to imprint it. So they famously, brought a suitcase full of money, and that swayed them into making this record. But that would also be the last Happy End record. That was kind of the end, and there's reasons for that. But were you listening to these records at home? Was this something that was on your turntable? But I imagine you were busy with a zillion things. What was in your ears?
So, being the record producer,
Yeah.
I didn't have a time to listen to other people's records because, they keep doing the recording in the studio and they bring the new recording to me. And those days, we used 16-channel analog tape recorder. So I have to check the balance of the, sound. I tell to the producer to, redo the vocal or, kind of thing. So I really didn't have time to other people's music. I spent almost all the time listening to the music my people produced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were then kind of seeking a sound, and you were eventually, and we'll get there, but it's good that you eventually started to work more with Hosono and that crew, because then the music that you were working on and had to listen to was this phenomenal music. Not that it wasn't before, but to be in that world, it must have been exciting. So this happy end project kind of fizzles, and but remains friends with all these folks. I mean, there's Eiichi Otaki, who's incredible, Shigeru Suzuki, Takahashi Matsumoto, heavy musicians who then started doing solo records and were making incredible music. But he starts this project. We heard the Hosono House before.
Oh, yeah.
Reels back, and he starts working on this record at Amerikamura, which is the Johnson Air Base.
You know everything. You know better than I.
but the military base, and this is maybe also one of the first times that he starts to do, like more of a private scaled back studio thing.
Yes. I heard that Hosono House was recorded in his house in American Village.
Yeah. So this was the American military base. This is the military
That's
housing.
Right.
Cheap rent. A lot of artists were out there. And so instead of going to an expensive studio, you set up a console in the room, you bring all your people in the cozy place, and he's getting closer to that vision. You don't have to bring a suitcase to America full of bills. You can do it in Japan with the right people, the time to do it. That becomes something that is important to him as well, to have this space, And there's a very important quote that Hosono says about Kuni Murai here. I was thinking of quitting music if I hadn't done anything by the age of 30. Murai allowed me to continue making music.
Oh, very nice of him.
That's a huge... So you're facilitating music, you're facilitating ideas. What did you feel was your main role in that relationship, and what were you hoping to allow to happen?
I loved his music, and he was signed to another record company those days.
Just kidding.
Yeah, but the name of the record company is Crown Record.
Yeah.
And he signed to Crown, but he released quite nice record. So I kept listening to him, and I kept seeing him in the recording studio as a bass player for my session.
Yeah.
And then one day I said, come to my company, Alpha. But he signed to Crown, so he cannot sign as an artist. So I said, why don't you sign Alpha as a producer? And why don't you create something you want to create in my company? So he signed the contract as a producer. So he's paid, monthly as a producer. And he told me that he thought he had to do something for the company because the company is paying money every month.
Strange concept.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, this is incredible. Earlier, Zach back there mentioned the famous name, the Medicis, these patrons. Mm-hmm. This is, you're recognizing somebody, he'd never been signed as a producer before, but you're recognizing this kind of spark in him. What was it about Hosono in that role that you felt was so important, and what did you feel would come out of the other end of it?
Well, both Hosono and I loved American music. Not only American music, but the music influenced by 20th century's American music. Starting from the World War I, 1910, 1920s, 1930s. And what was I talking about?
Your what you saw in him. I mean, so you're saying though you had a shared sensibility.
Right.
You had a shared sensibility of sound.
Both Hosono and I, we have a love for American or American influenced music, and we hoped someday we're gonna make a music for American people, for people in the world, created in Japan by Japanese people. So we share the same dream.
This is a super important thing because the Japanese music economy, the market was very domestic. It was the records being made were they might have been popular, but they were popular in Japan, and they were influential there, but it wasn't breaking outside of Japan. So you guys had this larger vision. Is that a lot of what was at the heart of Alfa Records, the label that you founded?
Yeah, that's the heart of making the company called Alpha, because in 1969, as I told you, I went to Paris. I started seeing the people. You know, in Paris is a very special city. The early 20th century, they accepted black musicians. So the guy who found Quincy Jones is French, Eddie Barclay, and then many jazz musicians went to France. So I started my career in France. So a lot of influence on France. And in that experience, I had a respect to American music. Eddie Barclay himself was a jazz pianist. So,
and this is also an artist-run label. So which
right.
is something special too. You weren't back there. I mean, there's I'm sure you've got a balance of books, but you were back.
Yeah, Mark, you hit the point. So, record companies, those days, especially in Japan, were run by a company like Matsushita, which is in America, Panasonic, I think. Columbia, those days, it was called Denon. That's a part of Hitachi. Mm-hmm. Do you know Hitachi? Yeah. They make a power plant, bullet trains.
Yeah, huge.
So those people used to run the company. So the presidents of all the record companies in Japan are, the people from GE or GM or something like that. But when I went to France and when I met Jerry Moss, when I came to United States, Ahmet Ertegun is just a,
That's A&M Records.
Atlantic
Records. Jerry Moss, A&M. Yeah.
Jazz fan. He's a jazz music collector.
Yeah.
And Jerry Moss is a music lover, and he was a promoter of the music. And Herb Alpert is a musician, the trumpet player. So I saw many people who are the top of the record companies. Yeah. So I thought it should be like that, because when I talked to the president of Victor Record...
Are you here about a microwave? Do you want to make a microwave, or do you want to make a color TV, or do you want to make a washing machine?
So when I talked to him, he doesn't understand music at all. So why he runs record company? That was 7 wonders of the world of mine. So I thought I should start the record company, because at least I love music,
So I want to hear a bit of the product of that record company and get into a bit of sound. So Crown Records, you have the first two of this tropical trilogy that Hosono was doing, and it was Tropical Dandy and Bon Voyage Company. So these 2 records that were in this tropical trilogy. And then you wooed him into a producer's contract, and then you also released this album, Paraíso, which now, thank goodness, is being issued here by Light in the Attic. And we're going to let's hear something from Paraíso. This is 1978. We've kind of skipped through time a bit. But I want to hear a cut from this to kind of get in this moment and then talk more about the label, and we'll continue the evolution here with Kuni Murai.
Okay. Nice music.
So that was a song called Femme Fatale, and that comes from this album, Paraíso. This is the third and final in the Tropical Trilogy. The interesting thing about that tune, amongst many, is the band for that tune, unlike the rest of the record, was Ryuichi Sakamoto and Yukihiro Takahashi, which was Yellow Magic Orchestra. So you've got Haruomi Hosono and the Yellow Magic Band here. So this was the first kind of seed of Yellow Magic Orchestra, hearing this kind of this tune. But tell us about Paraíso. What kind of conversation did you guys have as this was coming together?
So Hosono and I had a dream, as I told you, to sell our music in the international world. So this is the second trial of doing the project. And the first project we did, we found, Hosono said, I'd like to record the Creole artist. The Creole, you understand the meaning. And then I found a Creole singer, and we recorded. We spent, maybe $200,000 or something like that, but we didn't release it because
this is Linda
Carriel, right? And that was the first trial, and this is the second trial. And amazingly, this record those days sold only 3,000 copies.
So this first record,
we
didn't come
release it. Because I played the record to the people like Jerry Moss, and the people said, well, the singer is not good enough to break the market.
But there's a lot of heavyweights who are involved in the production of it, the writing of songs, including Hosono, but tons of other people. Yeah. It was a real heavyweight thing. But that's a pretty big move for to I'm sure you weren't thrilled about it, but to launch a label, to spend that much money on a record, and then realize when it was more important to shelve it and move on. So you must have been thinking, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm here to make the right records, too.
That's right. And then after this record, Hosono came to me, and he started telling about his plan to make Yellow Magic Orchestra, which uses the new instrument those days, synthesizer. And I approved it, and it took almost a year to make the first recording.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the Yellow Magic Orchestra.
So he had done a little bit of, this album, Paraíso, had some synthesizers, also the Cochin Moon album, too, which came out just before. We should hear a bit of that. We see the cover of this already is such a wild kind of vision.
Who's the art director?
Matt Yosuke. Let's check it out. Art direction, Aijiro Wakita. Album design, Kazuo Yasuhara.
Oh, yeah.
With photos by Yashitani Nakamoto.
Yeah. Wakita is a very famous sculptor. He passed away about 10 years ago. So we were surrounded by not only the musicians, but the artists, writers, all artistic people. That was a very lucky experience.
Well, we have this Cochin Moon album too, which, speaking of artists and creative people, I think is a very important record as well, because it has lots of connections to art. It's Yoko. What's the name here? Yeah,
Yoko Tadanori. What a great artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And And the scoop on that one, that was essentially, that was for King Records. That was 1978. That was around the exact same time as this. Were you kind of aware of what he was up to at that point? And
what year was it?
78.
78.
Yeah.
Is he signed to Alpha already?
So he was on King, but this was, I believe, this is right before, 2 months before YMO.
Oh.
Was he doing it on the side?
I didn't know that.
I didn't tell you.
Okay.
That's why he has that block on his phone. Just kidding. But I mean, it's at that point electronic music too in Japan. You have Tomita.
Tomita,
who
what a great guy.
Was huge.
Yeah,
And
I'd like to talk a little bit about Tomita.
I would love it.
Tomita is, I think, 18 years older than I. But we went to the same college, so we became friends. And in 1970, I went to island of Mallorca in the Mediterranean Ocean. And there was the meeting called Billboard International Music Conference or something like that. And then there was a demonstration of Moog, how do you pronounce Moog or Moog synthesizer? And that, so I knew about the synthesizer, but Hosono found a future in synthesizer, and so did Tomita.
Yes.
And in Tomita's case, he made Debussy's Moonlight in with using the synthesizer, and it became, it hit the American chart. So and
that was in the air. I mean, there's
1975, 76, 70, yeah.
But there was, the switched on Bach and Wendy Carlos stuff, and there was this idea of the classical. So, but at this point, it was he did Snowflakes Are Dancing. He also did some Ravel, but he was big. He had kind of a secret weapon in a way, or Hideki
Matsutake, yeah,
who was programming this stuff. And this is this era where it's not nimble, sort of, you don't have it. It's not an app on a phone. I mean, it's serious kind of programming.
Yeah.
But he was helping kind of the breakthrough to electronics for Hosono, for this Cochin Moon record. And it comes out of that, it seems like Hosono was a seeker too, and he was seeking kind of within, but also this album was the product of going to India. And he went with, I'll mess the name up, but some people already said it before.
I remember he went to India, and he almost died in India, and because of the diarrhea, he had a water or ice cream or salad, I don't know.
But he was also wooed to India. Tadanori Yoko actually wooed him to India by talking about diarrhea. And he was like, wow, like this is like, far out visual artist who's like, but almost like this cleansing, super intense experience. So he's breaking out of his mold. He's going on this trip. So he gets super sick.
Yeah, so that's the reason why I haven't been to India.
Don't go with him. Whatever he eats, eat the opposite. But I think we should hear a little bit of Cochin Moon too, because this is also important to a lot of the rest of his story.
Music of diarrhea.
So Humgar Sajan, and this is part of an important concept to him, this idea of kind of sightseeing. And but now at this point it was not really even him. It was Tadanori Yako who was kind of urging him to go in this direction. But this gentleman, visual artist, who turned him on to this idea to let's go to India, let's get diarrhea, let's capture the essence of the space and sound. And almost instead of field recordings and kind of that true environmental sound, it was what's the spirit of it? And let's bring it back to Japan. And then he gets in the studio with Hideki, who has the ability to program this stuff. And he's making this kind of electronic, Bollywood postcard thing. It's super inspired by Lata Mangeshkar and vocalists in India. But the other important kind of huge world-changing connection with Tadanori, we'll call him Tada, was that he turned him on to Kraftwerk. And that was a big kind of world-changing thing. Do you remember when Kraftwerk started kind of connecting to what they were doing? Did you hear them talk about Kraftwerk?
I heard, but I didn't listen to it. I didn't have time to listen to Kraftwerk.
You're making records.
I wasn't. Yeah, really, making records is 24 hours job. They keep bringing the new recording. I have to keep listening to all the records.
But that's a huge kind of imprint on Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Yeah.
And he brings in Hideki. He's got Yukihiro Takahashi, and he's got Ryuichi Sakamoto. So you have this dream team assembled and ready to go to action for Alfa Records. Tell us about the first YMO record and how this all came together.
I think that was late 70s, 79 maybe, 78. I was so busy. And my company, Alfa Records, became the licensee of A&M Records. So I was responsible for my artist. At the same time, A&M artists, those days, Police, Supertramp, all those stuff.
So you were importing this into Japan, licensing it
So licensing it, and I released A&M record in Japan. So it was so much work.
Yeah.
So I didn't have time to discuss with Hosono about the new project. And he came to me. We had maybe only half an hour to talk about the new project. And he started talking about this. I heard a little bit of it. He said something like a synthesizer, and I said, okay, do whatever you want,
Thank you. I'm sure he was happy at that point. I mean, again, if you're dealing with King Records, Crown Records, and you have these executives who are only looking at the money, and again, slinging toaster ovens or whatever, to work with somebody who has this refreshing outlook of trust, trust in let's do it. Let's make a record. Did they record? So Alpha also had a studio too.
Yeah.
And that was important.
Luckily, we had a studio. Yeah.
Tell us about your first studio.
My first studio is called Studio A. And those days, as I told you, I was a sub-publisher of Screen Gems Columbia. The writers were Carole King, Geffen and Carole King, Burt Bacharach, Neil Sedaka, some other big names.
Yeah.
And the president of the company is Lester Seal. Not many people remembers Lester Seal, but Lester Seal was like a boss of Phil Spector. Those days.
He was on top of the wall of sound, sitting perched.
So I knew. So I came to Los Angeles for the first time in 1970, and then I met Lester Seal, and I started meeting many people in here, and then I met Don Costa, the arranger. Those who love Frank Sinatra may remember him as a great arranger for Frank Sinatra. And his younger brother worked for Motown Records, and the Motown came from Motown to Los Angeles. those days, and they made a recording studio. And A&M also made a new recording studio. And then I hired the architect for the recording studio to make the Studio A. So it's a very hip, new recording studio in Japan, same as A&M and Motown.
So this was a West Coast style American studio.
That's true. Yeah.
The thing was purpose built to be that way.
Yeah.
Did it also have a different vibe, as far as the in studio vibe? Was it?
Let me tell you. Before those days, Motown and A&M, everybody recorded at Capitol, and in the huge room.
Yeah.
It's stereo, but they recorded the big orchestra and the singer at the same time. And after 70s, they started using 8 tracks, 16 tracks, 24 tracks. So the style of the recording changed. So the great recording in 1970s, like Tapestry album, Carole King, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, are recorded in that kind of recording studio. So I had the same similar studio in Tokyo. So luckily, Hosono started in that recording studio.
So he was familiar with that already, and then he's activating this new project, Yellow Magic Orchestra.
Yeah.
How long did they spend in there to record the first record?
Months. So the studio was occupied by Hosono. So Matsutake put the synthesizer, and when I went to the recording studio, I saw so many lines, hundreds of snakes on the floor. So they, creating the new sounds out of synthesizer. So I couldn't stay more than half an hour there because they were creating the sound from the synthesizer. So nowadays you can pick up any sound you want from internet. So there are millions of sound, including, for example, Vienna Philharmonic recorded the strings. So you can take the Vienna Philharmonic strings from the internet. So you can combine everything together. That's what it is right now. But those days, you have to create each different synthesizer sound from scratch. So they spent, so many hours in the recording studio. So I decided to make another studio for Hosono called LDK Studio. LDK means living, dining, and kitchen.
And he did live there.
So Hosono named the studio as LDK. Those days, recording this synthesizer sound takes forever. So they live there, they eat there, they sleep there. So that's the reason why he named the studio LDK Studio.
Wow. So let's play a tune from. So these guys get turned on to Kraftwerk. They've got Hideki there helping them program, but they have the luxury of time, a beautiful new studio, the space to do it, and their incredible talents coming together, but also getting turned on to the more European electronic music instead of Tomita, who was making really interesting music, but this was a different sensibility. Kraftwerk was making essentially, pop music, but in a new, most futuristic form. So maybe let's hear Firecracker. So we're going to hear some Yellow Magic Orchestra here. This is Firecracker, 1978. So this is Firecracker, and so YMO did all right, right? So the time in the studio that they spent was well worth it.
Yeah, I think so.
So you had this idea of making something more global and international.
Yeah,
And it was a relationship between you. You then also licensed to A&M Records.
A&M
You did it the
Records,
opposite
right.
way.
Because when I signed with A&M, I made it a mutual contract. I sell their record in Japan. They sell my record in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first trial for A&M to sell Japanese music to the world.
And it was successful. Was it surprisingly successful? Did you think that this sound would then reach people and around the world?
Actually, it reached. Yeah. It was 1979. The Yellow Magic Orchestra was invited to Greek theater to play with the Tube.
Yeah.
The Tube is the name of the band. And then from the start, it was a big success. Mm-hmm. The audience were so excited. I wasn't there, but I saw the video of the concert.
And there's videos online, so you can watch these videos on
yeah.
YouTube, and it's incredible.
That's
it's,
right.
Yeah, 1979 Greek theater opening for the Tubes, and they did some touring with the Tubes as well.
Right. Yeah.
And they were dedicated to making records, so they had right afterward Solid State, Survivor. There is a tune on here called Behind the Mask. Mm-hmm. And Michael Jackson was a big fan of this song. Can you tell us a bit about that?
He covered Behind the Mask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he also wanted to...
You know everything.
He wanted to cover it even more and put it on Thriller. Uh-huh. But Sakamoto, who wrote that, didn't like that idea as much, I guess. Do you remember this time?
I don't remember, but I remember that Ryuichi Sakamoto is always... He made all the troubles.
But they were also, maybe they were the real businessmen. I mean, Sakamoto, and because a lot of the music too was for commercials, for Seiko or different companies. These guys were also very busy making commercial music too. But they had a streak of albums. Were they performing a lot in Japan too? Were they?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And what was the kind of stage show there? What was there? Because they had a lot of instruments that were probably new to audiences to see on stage.
I remember the concert in Budokan. Budokan is the initially it's for Japanese martial art. Yeah. Like kendo, sword, judo, and kind of thing. But the place became very famous because the Beatles, when they came to Japan for the first time, they performed at the Budokan. Yeah. So all the musicians of the world came to Budokan. So YMO played at the Budokan maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So I was there.
Were there record sales as they were huge in Japan, right? I mean, they were...
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. We sold millions of records in Japan.
And so would you hear this as you moved through Tokyo? Would you hear this coming out of cafes or bars or cars? Was this on the streets, or was it kind of behind closed doors?
Again, I was too busy listening to my record. So I don't remember well.
Well, it made a big impact, and they also had a close connection to electronics companies. I mean, at this point, Japan, again, you were a visionary in thinking of Japanese music as an export. Because Japan, that's the era, and this was the kind of great economic miracle of Japan. Post-war, very affluent time for Japan. Yeah. And they were exporting cars, so Toyota and Nissan, all these cars were hitting the world, and they're floating out there. Electronics as well. Music, not so much at that point, not really at all until
not at all.
Yeah, YMO hit.
Yeah, 1950s. There was the song called Sukiyaki.
Yes,
That's the first music came to the United States.
And it was a little kitschy.
Yeah.
But I think that the interesting thing, and we hear also in Firecracker, and that was also Martin Denny cover
that's
too.
Right. More international.
So Hosono, especially throughout his work, there was this kind of exotica idea and almost like a fetishism of exotica. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is he was also, and YMO, were also flipping it and skewing it and saying, the world right now, is thinking of Japan, and Japan is exotic to the world. We're getting cars, we're getting electronics, and it's this futuristic thing. Almost in a satirical way, looking through the lens of the world at themselves and making this almost self-referential exotic music and playing with that, having fun with the perception and bending perceptions, much like Happy End was bending language to fit what they wanted. Yeah. So it was a band that was doing amazing things, but also had a close connection to these companies. As Alpha, were you doing a lot of work with companies with TV and with licensing music to companies?
I don't understand the question.
Was Alpha working closely with both licensing music companies, but also with, say, electronic instrument manufacturers in Japan?
No, not at all.
No, okay.
We concentrated on only music.
But the band was connected. I mean, this was...
Well, all those companies
wanted
to give the new instrument to them.
And I'm sure Hosono was not saying no to this.
Well, they tried everything, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move into, you mentioned Living Dining Kitchen Studios. One of the reasons I've heard maybe whispers is they were spending way too much time at Studio A.
Oh, and Studio A?
So they were spending too much time at Studio A. Was that one of the reasons you built him his own studio?
That's true. The Studio A is quite huge, big studio, maybe twice of this room.
Yeah.
And then, Hosono take whole place, 24 hours a day. So other Alpha artists couldn't do the recording in the studio. So I gave him LDK studio, maybe half of this room. And then I told him, you can do whatever you want here.
So he goes into LDK Studios. He also takes a break after touring and being so busy.
So this LDK studio is has a very strange structure. So it's like there used to be a restaurant on the ground floor. So opening the door, there's a studio.
Yeah.
So one day I opened the studio, and Hosono was laying down on the floor. I thought he's dead. But he was sleeping because he was, doing all those work all through the night.
So this was his space. He could spend to his heart's content and more.
Yeah, that's right.
Spend time there. So this record came out of that space, Philharmony, and this is the first on a label called Yin Records, too. Before we get into Yin, I actually think we should play a bit of this, but I also want to say, featuring guest performers, Emulator, Films, MC4, Prophet 5, and on, plus people, but he's actually naming the electronic music instruments as guest performers on the record because it was that important to him. I think to get into, I kind of feel like, so Zach and I have this is very close to our hearts. So maybe we'll hear two pieces from this. Let's hear Luminescent Hotaru and Sportsman.
Mark, everybody, can I introduce you somebody who signed to Yen Record?
I'm so happy. Yes, I know who this is, and please introduce.
So my friend Daisuke Hinata is there. Come up here.
and his band Interior is incredible. And same year. Oh, Daisuke.
So say something.
So come sit with us, Daisuke. Let me move my junk out of the way here.
Sure.
I'm curious. So this is what is beautiful to me is that this is maybe this trust that has enabled all of this to flow. The trust in music and the power of music. That Kuni trusted Hosono, brought him in. That birthed YMO, which then was, a self-fulfilling prophecy. It had success because it was talent with trust from the label, resources that then could create, a system that could spawn now a sub-label, a new label called Yin Records, which allowed Hosono to put out his own solo music, Philharmony, this beautiful album where he could spend tons of time, but also to work with artists that he loved and to really showcase. And so Daisuke Hinata of Interior is one of these artists. And I want to get this term right. Shinjin Rui? Shinjin Rui, which is new type of person, right? This is a thing that was coming up. You are a new type of person, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about your relationship to Hosono-san and Interior and how you felt. Like what was in the air?
So it's all related. The one example was that so Kuni gave Hosono the studio time, right? And the studio A turned out to be LDK. So I was asking
producer.
I was asking Hosono to give me free studio time at LDK, so that I can do whatever I want to do. Yeah. And he said, "How much time ever you want?" The same thing.
Yeah. So it's this pay it forward sort of thing.
I didn't know that it came from him till now.
That spirit, incredible.
So I came back from Boston.
Yeah.
To Tokyo.
And were you at Berkeley? Were you studying there? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And this band Interior, 4 guys are all from Berkeley.
Yeah.
And so we were totally new kind of musicians because we weren't doing anything back in Japan.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any connection, nothing. All we knew was that we saw YMO in Boston. So my sax guy said, "I'm going to go back to Japan and meet the guy and tell him that how great we are." Crazy, right? Yeah. So he spent a month to 2, finally met Hosono, told him that I'm worth a lot for you. You have to listen to my music. And he listened. Wow. Strange enough that he took us seriously.
What about his? I mean, you're obviously. It's interesting because you're in Japan and moving to Boston to kind of break out and find something new. Mm-hmm. Hearing what's really new for you coming from Japan, going back to Japan, talking to Hosono. What was his demeanor like when you talked to him? I mean, it sounds like he was willing to spend the time, but what was your sense of his personality and his kind of vibe?
He was like a pure musician, and if he likes what we play, he likes it. He produced us, but he didn't tell me anything, nothing. He came to the studio and take a nap. That's all.
It sounds like he did that a lot.
Yeah, but that made us so secure.
Yeah.
So,
incredible.
Yeah.
And so you are one of these new type of people, Shinjin Rui, along with Guernica, Test Pattern.
Right.
I mean, did you feel kinship amongst also the other artists on Yin and feel like, I mean, Hosono was also on his own label at this point too, which is really nice. Did you know these other artists?
Yeah, but we were young and so competitive, right? So Hosono is the only person to talk to, and other guys were like, all the rivals or just like, you're so silly, go there kind of thing.
Did you hear each other's music much?
Yeah.
Rivals have to check in on each
criticize,
other.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was fun.
And what was, when you talked to Hosono and made the case for Interior, what was your case? Like, what did you say to him to make him believe, or was it through the music exclusively? I'm not going to say anything. You've got to hear this.
It was kind of easy because we kind of presented one poppy demo, and one totally not poppy. It's like environmental music kind of thing, and we were hoping that he would pick this poppy pop song that we were gonna be like a rock star or something, right? Sounds a little like Police, kinda. But he didn't have any interest on that one. But this weird music that we can make it so easy, he got so into it.
Interesting.
Right, and he was encouraging us to continue doing this.
Did you feel truly like it was easy to make?
It was something that we have to make, so let's make one now. And 10 minutes later, it's done. So 4 of us had some kind of chemistry that made that kind of contemporary music easier to create. Like, it was so easy, too easy that it didn't have any value to us. But he found some value to.
Let's hear some easy listening. This is Cold Beach, 1982. You can see the cover there. Zach's got it. Cold Beach from Interior, 1982. Wow. And this is what Zach's saying is this room is like made for this music, or maybe this record you didn't know it was made for this room. But we're going to hear Cold Beach from Interior.
Thank you.
The grandfather here. He's godfather, grandfather. You like birthed all of this.
Yes.
So that's 1982 Yin Records. That's Interior, Cold Beach, and there is Interior music coming out too as part of the Light in the Attic Japanese series of releases that are all interrelated. And Yosuke, the title of that record again, what is it? Environmental music, and it's compiled by Spencer Duran of Visible Cloaks, and it's a great record all the way through. You live here in LA, right?
Yes.
So can you please keep making easy music for us? It's such an incredible record, and I think that, again, this kind of journey or I think that the ripples of action and doing things for the right reason. You're in music because you loved it. You're a songwriter. You're a musician. You're there focused, but then you're allowing the possibility for all of this to happen. And Daisuke and Interior are, the sounds that have graced our ears are the product of that. So we thank you so much for Kuni Murai for making Alpha happen, for making Yin happen. Huge.
I thank you. I thank you very much. It's an amazing. When I started the company. Almost like 50 years ago, and I'm so glad that your people love the music still.
And more and more so, what's happening is that when I was saying earlier, I think all of us are kind of slow to get this because it wasn't it was available, the YMO records, and you broke through, but now it's coming. It's almost like your dream is really coming to fruition, where this is international music now. It's gracing stereos all over the world, headphones all over the world.
Yeah.
And so we thank you so much for doing it, and Daisuke as well for making incredible music. Let's hear it again. Kuni Murai, Daisuke.
Thank you very much. So, thank you.
A lot of this music would not have been possible even to now come out on Light in the Attic, who are doing such an incredible job. Yosuke Kitazawa is in charge of this series, so let's hear it for Yosuke Kitazawa, who is... So this music has broken through and now is widely available to the world. Got to give a plug, Zach Cowie back there. Incredible in sheep's clothing. And Zach and myself and our buddy Andy Kabik from the band Vetiver co-produced and compiled a record that's coming out as part of the series called Pacific Breeze, and it's boogie, funk, disco, city pop, etc. from Japan. That'll come out early next year on Light in the Attic. So much to come. Excited about it. I hope you guys can tune in and connect to all of it. But big thanks to all of you. Yay!
Thank you.
There's a highway telling me to go where I